Greetings, dear viewers. This is George from Ireland, and this video is about gun control in the United States, something I think the United States should introduce in a more extensive manner. Now, you might be an American watching this and saying, what is this person from another country talking about mine? Well, I'm just offering advice because I care about people generally. In every country, the US government offers advice unsolicited to every government in the world, producing reports of them, and sometimes it's sound advice. So here's mine, not that I'm a government. Let's start from first principles. Is a society entitled to restrict or outlaw dangerous items? I think almost everyone would accept that a society is entitled to do so. So, are guns dangerous? Seems like it to me, because in the United States there are about 30,000 gun deaths per annum. A lot of people in America point to the Second Amendment of the Constitution and say we have guns to defend against tyranny. It doesn't actually say that in the Second Amendment, that's why they're there, but saying we need a well-ordered militia and the right to bear arms shall not be abridged. But I'll get back to that. So really need to concentrate on just how horrific this is. 30,000 gun deaths a year. That's 9/11 times 10 every single year. But it gets very little airtime considering a mass shooting with 50 people, sure, but there are dozens of individual shootings each day, not all of them fatal, but the cumulative airtime for them is minimal considering. If, on the other hand, a guy from Uzbekistan mows 8 people down with a truck, well, that's headline news for several days. Though the actual total number of people killed by foreign terrorists is a drop in the ocean. So gun deaths are so prolific in the United States, surely they're an issue of national security. Usually when the words national security are mentioned, many people in the United States want to throw out civil liberty, and they will say salus populi lex suprema est, that this concern, it trumps all others and all other rights can be junked, that you can have warrantless wiretapping, you could bring in waterboarding, you could detain people for over 15 years in Guantanamo Bay without a trial. That's all acceptable, holding the Constitution in abeyance for the sake of a small number of people killed. Since 9/11, really, it's been a minuscule number of people killed, bearing in mind the population of the United States is 320 million, a minuscule number of people killed by foreign terrorists. It's staggering to think there's advertising aimed at children promoting guns. I mean real guns, like the cricket gun. It can actually kill people. In Kentucky it was aimed at children. Children were shown in the television adverts firing it. In one case a 5-year-old shot dead his 2-year-old sister. I know it's not a typical case, but surely no adverts for deadly weapons should be aimed at children. Weapons which are designed to kill human beings, not pretend weapons. Well, back to the Second Amendment. I pointed out what it says. I don't agree with it. And many people on this discussion feel they need to come out and say that they concur with it straight away. An amendment is just that. It can be changed. It is not sacred. This is a man-made document. It's been amended 25 occasions. It can be amended again. Anyway, it's not honoured as it is. There are abridgments in the right to bear arms. People are not allowed to take firearms into courtrooms, into prison. If you're sent to prison, you need to defend yourself from the other criminals there, surely. They're not allowed to take them onto planes, into the White House. There are all sorts of restrictions. We know that automatic weapons are usually banned, things like that. So it already is abridged, rightly, but it needs to be much further abridged. Gun nuts will always say we need more guns. The answer to gun deaths is always more guns. Curiously, the answer to drug deaths from them is never more drugs. They talk about these attacks on churches, and the answer of the gun lobby is to say, well, the congregation should all be armed. Actually, some of them are armed in many cases. How do you know a congregant isn't going to shoot the other churchgoers? Well, high school shootings, let's have armed guards at every school. How do you know the guard isn't going to go crazy and she's not going to shoot the children? We'll arm all the teachers. How can you be certain a teacher won't lose his temper and shoot all the pupils? And arm all the kids in case they need to be defending themselves against the teachers? What could go wrong? Surely it stands to reason, the more guns there are, the more gun deaths are going to be. A few counterexamples, but I'll come to that later. Look at guns abroad. I've heard gun advocates say that guns are a human right. When the US military liberated Afghanistan and Iraq, what's the first thing they did? Confiscate guns from ordinary families. Taking away these people's means to defend themselves against terrorists and against armed robbers. So why is it not sauce for the goose if it's sauce for the gander? If you're liberating these countries, surely you should allow them gun rights too, unless, of course, you consider them to be subhuman. On the arms issue, people sometimes say that the Iranian government is developing nuclear arms. Well, why shouldn't they? They feel they need arms to defend their homeland, so the US should support that, not try and prevent it, because the Constitution says the right to bear arms. It doesn't say guns, it says arms. That could be any kind of weapon. There were no automatic weapons in the 18th century when the Constitution was written, but there are now, and some of the gun nuts try to say, well, it applies to automatic weapons as well, so it must apply to nuclear weapons as well. Why not ricin? Or how about Americans like Bill Gates? He could afford his own nuclear bomb to defend himself. Why shouldn't he be allowed to own one? No limitations at all, remember. The right to bear arms shall not be abridged. That's holy writ, according to gun nuts. And why wouldn't the Iranians want nuclear weapons when many American politicians are constantly saying that they want to attack Iran, so they need to defend their home? How about guns for Palestine? Israel illegally stops and raids ships in international waters to stop weapons coming to Palestine, but the Palestinians, if they want arms to defend their home, why shouldn't they be allowed to? They're often under attack. They've been under illegal occupation for 50 years with weapons provided for free by the United States in many cases. So they've every reason to want to do that and to prevent thousands of their civilians being killed by the Israeli military. Well, back to the American Revolution. And some gun nuts get this the wrong way around. The Crown Forces, they tried to confiscate gunpowder because of the threat of revolt. Right? The revolt did not begin because of the threat to confiscate guns. People are mistaking cause for consequence. So why have these weapons? People like Ben Shapiro say that they might need a second revolution in case tyranny emerges. So Shapiro and all these conservatives who so adulate the police, they want to be cop killers. That's what it comes down to. They want to kill their beloved US military. Some patriots, aren't they? But would this even work? If you have small arms against the US military, who's going to win? The US military with its tanks, its planes, its ships, its drones, its nukes. Small arms really going to do the trick? Somehow, I don't think so. And so, which revolution do these gun nuts approve of since the American Revolution? Do you approve of all the Arab Spring revolutions, or what? I don't think so. All the left-wing revolutions in various African, Latin American nation countries? Again, I don't think so. There have been peaceful revolutions, for example, in Eastern Europe, well, say Czechoslovakia, Poland, and so forth, massive demonstrations just bringing down governments, no use of force. Anyway, gun nuts, you want all your militias to be armed to the teeth. How do you know the militias are not going to be the tyrants? There were these gun rights in the 60s, when African Americans were still being tyrannized, when they're still being lynched willy-nilly, and these ritual murders were witnessed by hundreds of people, and the killers almost always got away with it. Gun rights didn't prevent the Native Americans who had guns, them being driven off their land and then being massacred. So the argument is bogus that this will prevent tyranny. It's been pointed out that Sudafed is more restricted than firearms. You can't buy as many as 6 packets of Sudafed in one go in the United States. If you really need to kill tyrants, why don't you just poison them with Sudafed? So Ben Shapiro, very articulate gun advocate, said because of the lack of guns, his grandparents were murdered in the Holocaust. But it's not as though there were no guns in civilian hands in Europe in the 1940s. There were partisan movements who resisted Nazism with small arms, but it was not very effective. So it wouldn't have made the difference, I'm afraid. So I know that gun nuts say, but cars kill people. Are you going to ban automobiles? No, because cars exist for transport. Guns exist to kill people. A gun nut said to me, but burgers kill people. Well, burgers are there for nutrition. As part of a healthy diet, nothing wrong with eating burgers. One burger won't kill you. One bullet will. So it'll take thousands and thousands of burgers to kill you. So gun nuts often say, guns don't kill people kill people. Do guns fire themselves? So it's really making sure that bad people don't get a hold of them. A bad guy with a gun is only stopped by a good guy with a gun. That's true. But wouldn't it be better to prevent that bad guy getting his hands on a gun in the first instance? Then he wouldn't need to be shot. So this is often an issue of machismo. Some inadequate people feel it's a penis extension for them to have a gun. It also raises the stakes in a crime. It turns a mugging into a murder. Better not to mug people, of course, at first. yes, it is the criminal's fault, not the victim's fault. The criminal thinks this person may have a gun, better shoot him before he shoots me. Guns increase the suicide rate. There are also accidents when people are killed by guns. And the police, they just seem to shoot too soon very often. As has been pointed out, police in the United States, they killed more people in 1 month than British people killed in 100 years, the British police. Admittedly, the US's population is 5 times larger, but even taking that into account, the number of gun deaths is still grossly disproportionate. I know there are counterexamples you might cite, Latin American countries with very high rates of gun deaths despite stringent gun laws. That's because these are often failed states like parts of Colombia or Mexico. And where do the drug gangs sell their drugs to? Mainly the United States, and that's how the drug criminals are able to buy guns, mainly from the United States. So we could legalize drugs which harm the person who takes them and restrict guns which harm other people on the whole. So I've got several ideas to improve the situation. Raise the gun ownership age for civilians, allow only one handgun and one hunting rifle per adult, a very high tax on guns and bullets. You could have no loopholes for private trades. 40% of all gun sales are private trades, and therefore no background checks in those cases. Close that loophole. Have a gun owner's course in Germany. You have to pass that, prove you're a responsible gun owner before you're allowed one. Have legal liability for selling guns and bullets. If you sell a gun and it's used for murder, well, you're going to have to pay out a ruinous compensation. That's all.